Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to take a journey, not so much into the mind itself, but into the subtle folds of our daily lives. With his celebrated The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, published in 1901, Sigmund Freud did more than speak of mental illness or hidden complexes. He showed us how the unconscious speaks within us constantly, even through the most ordinary gestures, a mistake, a forgetfulness, a joke, a wrong word. For Freud, nothing in the human mind is accidental. Every slip, every distraction, every small mental mishap is a message emerging from beneath the surface, a window through which the unconscious seeks to be heard. How often do we say the wrong name, use one word instead of another, or suddenly forget something important? Freud observed these phenomena with a revolutionary eye. Rather than seeing them as simple mistakes, he interpreted them as failed acts, actions guided by repressed desires or thoughts. A famous example: a man forgets an appointment with a friend. On the surface, it seems like a simple distraction, but beneath it, that forgetfulness may conceal a wish to avoid the person, an unresolved tension, a small unspoken truth. Freud teaches us that what we cannot say with words, the mind expresses through errors. This is the true revolution of Freud's thought. There is no clear boundary between the normal and the pathological. The same dynamics that shape dreams or neurotic symptoms also manifest themselves in our most ordinary days. When we forget a name, mix up a date, break something by accident, or unconsciously decide to be late. The unconscious is at work, and it acts with its own style, symbolic, subtle, ironic. Freud's goal was not merely to treat neuroses, but to reveal the hidden architecture of the human mind. With The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, he shifted the focus of psychoanalysis from the patient to the ordinary person. Madness was no longer elsewhere, it lived within each of us, mild, daily, and alive. Freud loved to say that error is the royal road to self-knowledge. Each time something goes wrong, the mind shows us a small crack in our carefully controlled conscious image. Through that crack, we can glimpse what we truly desire or fear. Consider a slip of love saying "I love you" to the wrong person, or confusing a name from the past. It's not just embarrassment, it's the trace of an emotion that lacked the courage to surface. Freud invites us not to censor these moments, but to listen to them. Behind a slip, often, lies a sincerity deeper than language itself. Freud reveals a fascinating paradox. The more we try to control our minds, the more the unconscious finds creative ways to emerge. It's kind of like an artist who insists on being seen. If you close the door, it enters through the window, disguised as an error, a dream, or even a joke. In this sense, The Psychopathology of Everyday Life is not just a scientific text, but really a philosophy of awareness. It teaches us that human beings are not perfectly rational creatures, but fragile balances between logic and desire, between order and chaos. More than a century has passed since Freud, and yet his insight remains astonishingly relevant. Today, in an age dominated by speed, multitasking, and the illusion of digital control, our failed acts continue to speak to us. An unsent message, a misunderstood word, a sudden lapse of memory, these are still signs of our unconscious, just translated into the language of modernity. Neuroscience now confirms what Freud had intuited. Most of our decisions arise from unconscious mental processes. The brain acts, anticipates, chooses, and only afterward does consciousness invent a rational explanation. Freud understood this long before any machine could measure it. There is a side of Freud that's often forgotten. His writing is not only analytical, it is profoundly literary. Each case, each example is narrated with rhythm, irony, and introspection. Freud doesn't merely observe the mind, he tells its story. In this way, The Psychopathology of Everyday Life is also a masterpiece of narrative. Freud moves like a detective of the soul, collecting clues, interpreting signs, and finally piecing together the mosaic of human behavior. Freud dreamed of a more self-aware humanity. His goal was not only to heal, but to illuminate, to make visible what works in the shadows. When we learn to recognize the signals of the unconscious, when we stop labeling them as errors or weaknesses, then we begin to become a little freer. Because freedom, after all, is not the absence of impulses. It is the ability to know them, to listen to them, and to choose consciously. Freud leaves us with an immortal lesson. Man is not transparent to himself. We are creatures of depth, crossed by memories, desires, fears, and dreams that continually intertwine with reality. So, The Psychopathology of Everyday Life invites us to a simple yet revolutionary gesture. To look with curiosity and respect at our small mistakes, because within them speaks the truest and most human part of us. Perhaps it is precisely in a slip, a forgetfulness, or an involuntary glance that the mind finally tells the truth the heart has always known. Where it was, ego shall be, thus wrote Freud. And in those few words lies the very meaning of our inner journey, to transform the unconscious into awareness, error into knowledge, and everyday life into an act of revelation.